Welcome back to the Bridge the Gap podcast with Oliver and Zack. This is the show where we bridge the gaps between spirituality and science, heart and mind, and thoughts and emotions in the different sectors of society. Today, Zack wanted to talk about the awakening process for men, and I think that's a fantastic topic that we both can relate to and have a lot to share on. And it's quite juicy. I think there's a lot of things we could talk about. And I want to allow Zack to lead because Zack was a men's coach for quite some time and very good at it. So go for it, man.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting thing to talk about. For those that don't know, when I started my trauma-informed coaching practice around 4 years ago, 90% of my clients were women. And that's primarily where my focus was. And along that path, I just noticed that during my awakening and healing journey, it was just a little bit different as a man. Not better or worse, but different. And so about a year and a half ago, I decided to switch completely to seeing men. And within that, I had to learn how to adapt a lot of these trauma-informed healing techniques to men, because men actually do process emotions differently, and society's response in general is different to a man when they're undergoing healing and awakening. As men, a lot more of our value is predicated on our ability to produce, to always be able to go, right? And it is more discouraged for men to kind of share their feelings or emotions with other men. So when a man goes through an awakening journey, when a man decides to start healing, a lot of times he has to self-isolate. There really isn't that communal element. Even in the certain men's work community spaces that I joined, there's a lot of great men's work spaces. But as a man who's specifically going through a spiritual awakening, I still didn't always necessarily feel seen. Because this for Oliver, our podcast is Bridge the Gap. But both of you and I have had spiritual awakenings. Both of you and I have had some experiences that many would consider a little bit wooey. I'm trained in shamanism.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? And
yeah.
And the masculine is all about being on the ground and being structured, right? But the awakening experience is as opposing to that as possible, right? It's chaos. And so as men, we're trying to move with the flow of this thing that is really beyond our ability to conceive, right? It's not
and I think we should, like, for the viewers as well, I think we should kind of define what it means to have an awakening, because I think that word gets thrown around a lot and could mean a lot of different things. I think we both have opinions on that, but I'm curious to hear yours first.
Well, I mean, so an awakening is, I feel like we live in these programmed loops that aren't necessarily bad or good. They just are. Like we are programmed with certain behavioral patterns that we engage in. We identify to this personality structure. Like we say, I am Zack. I'm a 32-year-old white man who was in law school. And then we become heavily identified with that structure, right? An awakening is breaking the walls down of the perceived self in a way. Right?
Sure.
And also, I think an awakening sometimes can blow you open to the interdimensional nature of reality. We actually are multidimensional beings, right? And I love that. Can you hear what's going on in the background? I'm sorry.
No, you're good. Yeah.
Okay. It is like this. We start to recognize that there is a reality that exists beyond our physicalized five senses. I think you've encountered that too. And that's different. I grew up atheist my entire life. Like I thought what I could see in front of me, that was it. Angels, demons, whatever, that was all fake. None of that was real. Right. And everything was just random chaos, but that gave me some sense of control. Like it's fine. Like this is just what it is. I go out, I live my life. To kind of come into this awareness, at least for me, that there are things that I could not perceive that were overseeing my process, or that there was this
that there was something greater than yourself that maybe you can't see. You know, people say God, maybe you see like angels, that word, or there's so many different interpretations, but it kind of, like people eventually realize, kind of like how all religions are really just talking about the same thing, or all
Yes.
spiritual is all the same thing. And I think a simple definition, because like it can be very complex, but like a simple definition that I would give
Hmm.
for awakening is just becoming aware to
Yeah.
the metaphysical nature of reality,
Yes. I love that.
to the part that we cannot see, we cannot scientifically quantify, but there is very real experiences that we all share in different unique ways that points to something that, like, there is something more going on here than I think I know, which makes a lot of sense too when you think about it in terms of like the scientific lens, right? We talk about spirituality to science, bridging that gap. This is it. Even from a scientific lens, if you look on a chart of
Mhm.
like the chart of the spectrum of the wavelengths of light,
Yeah.
you look at visible light, what we're able to see, it is a tiny, tiny fraction
I love
of
how you
the
say.
actual energy going on, right?
Yeah.
So even on that scientific lens, yeah, we clearly, there's so much more going on than we can see, than we actually understand.
Yeah.
And you think about like just a couple hundred years ago, or however long, like this guy who came up with the germ theory that, oh, there are these little tiny organisms that's why we get sick, little germs. He was like burned at the stake. He was executed. He was killed for that, right? Just a few hundred years ago,
Yeah.
right? Universe, like even just the Earth, is billions of years old. So we are very primitive, even in our science and our understanding. So it's just kind of becoming aware that, oh yeah, there's so much more going on. There's definitely a spiritual aspect. I think like the mind, body, spirit is very important for understanding who we are.
Yeah.
And most people are kind of just, I guess you could say mainstream, or like, it's hard to say, like the average person, they only really think about their mind and their body. And even that, they probably don't think about it too much. But unless you're really connected with spirit, I think it's not the full embodiment of who we really are. So maybe that wasn't as simple as I was planning it to be, but
No, but it's really great, and I think what you said really lends in. You actually did a much better job articulating it than I did. Like there was, it's like you come
I'll
into
take it.
yeah, it's you come into contact with this deeper self that is different than your mind's perception of who you are, right? And so there's this contradiction. You come in, and it's almost like you access deeper elements of the subconscious, and you're like, wait. The only reason I'm experiencing my reality like this is because my family or my whatever told me to. This deeper me is really upset. This is why I feel depressed. This is why I feel anxious, and I'm given medication to just kind of numb that response. But there's a deeper quality of me that existed. Who is this me? Right?
Yes, definitely.
It's
And that deeper quality, I think, is very feeling based. It's a feeling. And that's going back to men. That's where I think a lot of men can struggle, because you made this point before we started about like a lot of us men, we're not allowed to have feelings. Like our family or our society, we judge us, oh, boys don't cry, or these types of things, where it's okay for a lot of women to be emotional. And again, spiritual awakening, there's a lot of feelings that get awakened, and it's uncomfortable.
Oh, and it's not even that. I mean, for me, like in the beginning of my awakening, like I was actually like teaching the law school entrance exam. So I was teaching college students logical reasoning. Like that's all I was doing, was teaching logic. And now I'm engaged in a process that transcends logic. Like when we talk about the masculine's like what the masculine is grounded in is this ability to have structure, logic, right? Like a high level of reasoning. And now we're embodied in this experience where we're asked to lean into intuition. We're asked to lean into an inner knowing that transcends the ability for you to logically, like for you to analyze from a logical lens of what's
Yes.
going on. And it's almost like for men especially, it's an internal war, right?
Yes.
Because you're especially as men, we function so primarily in the mind, and now you're asked to trust this inner knowing. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Right? And stepping into greater states of consciousness that aren't readily accepted in society. Like I do think it's a little bit more accepted for a woman to kind of just work within that flow, to work within that knowing. to kind of just trust in in those little hits. But for a man to do so, that was tough for me to leave a full scholarship at a top law school to go initially do mindfulness and meditative work. Like everyone looked at me like I was a nut job. Like the support wasn't there. It wasn't
I'm
like,
sure. Yeah.
yeah, it wasn't like, oh, good for Zack. He's living out. He's like, wow, he really
It's like,
lost.
oh, he's realizing his truest self. It's like,
Yeah,
no, this
no,
dude's fucking nuts. Oh my God. Yeah.
yeah.
And that's the gap. That's the problem. Because it's not fucking nuts. If you're going through an awakening and you're having these crazy experiences, whether you're a woman or a man, like it's valid. It's real. There's a reason it's happening. And if people are gaslighting into believing that you're like crazy or there's something wrong, that's where you have to go deeper within yourself and find your own truth and self-validate.
Well, and it's even interesting because so then for me, like when I went through my awakening, I started working at this in-person healing center, right? And so I was seeing clients in person, and the healing center was kind of really engaged in like this new age spirituality, which is very heavily rooted in like tarot cards and crystals. And not that they don't have value, but for as a guy who's very grounded in his masculine energy, I'm going through this awakening experience, and like, I mean, I don't want to know I don't want to know all the different types of crystals. I'm not going to pull tarot cards. Like this thing looks different for me, not better. It's different. And so it felt, so obviously I'm leaving the legal sphere. I don't necessarily fit into a lot of the practices that the new age sphere like is really putting forth. And then so as a man, you're once again feeling even more lonely and isolated in the awakening experience.
Yeah, definitely. And like for you, how did you deal with that? How did you like successfully deal with that? Like isolation or just feeling alienated?
I mean, for myself, it's like I was alone for 2 or 3 years, right? And I mean, I lost everything from this experience. Going through an awakening healing journey, I was engaged in that time. I lost that because I wasn't grounded. It was the energy of me was actually really fragmented and distorted because I was trying to ground this awakening experience into a framework that didn't fit me either as a man. And so it's almost like I had to figure out by myself what it looked like for a few years and then put myself back out there, and people were ready to see, oh, he's really the same Zack with just a little bit more color to him, right?
A little bit of sauce.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, people thought I was nuts when I was training shamanism, but then they realized, oh, he's really just tapping into some different states of consciousness. He's still grounded in him, but it took me a few years to get there. And I see a lot of men go through that. Like I see a lot of men, like when they go through an awakening, feel like they have to toss aside the aspects that are more masculine of them, right? Or they really shut down and isolate. And it's really trying to convey to men that there is space for both, that we have to start creating a representation of what this can look like as a man, right?
And that you can balance that logical side with that intuitive side in a way where you don't feel crazy, but you feel even more embodied of who you are.
Yeah, it was really interesting because like, the spiritual spheres were also encouraging you to do all these like very floaty practices. And even though I was going through an awakening, even though I was having experiences of encountering the like non-ordinary nature of these non-ordinary dimensions of reality, I, as a man, I felt like, dude, I need to stay here. Like I really am still supposed to be that grounded presence that's very rooted in my body while still accessing these different states of consciousness. Like I wasn't supposed to be astral projecting or blasting off, right? And so it really took a lot of time because I didn't really feel there was a representation for what this looked like for me. And I was going to have to go and find that for myself, right?
Yeah, definitely. And kind of what you were saying earlier, like having the identity that you've had, especially as a man. And a lot of us men are very logical. We think a lot. We're in our mind. When you start having these intuitive experiences that you're being drawn to explore that, you almost have to go against the person that you've been your entire life.
Yeah.
In order to do that, which is freaking terrifying. It feels like, honestly, feels like you're gonna die, because that's who you've been. That's the certainty that you have about life. And when that falls away, uncertainty is one of the most uncomfortable experiences. And I know for me, just like you, Zach, I was a hard-headed atheist. I was an angry atheist. I was the type of dude that if you told me you were religious or spiritual, I would start making fun of you and disrespecting you to your face.
Yeah, me too.
Because I was so unhappy and I thought it was all bullshit. Science is the only way to know stuff. It's all just a coincidence. You don't know what you're talking about. Like, there's no science, no evidence. And then, to be very honest, I had a psychedelic experience that sparked my awakening.
Yeah.
And within 10 minutes of this experience, I became a spiritual seeker, because I was giving, and that's the thing, it's like personal experience is king. Because once you have that firsthand experience of divinity, of something greater, doubt starts to just fall away.
Yeah.
And that's the problem that I think a lot of religious people face, is because if they haven't had a personal experience and they're just being told that this is the right religion, you're supposed to believe this, if not, you're a bad person. There's a lot of that kind of messaging. Then it's really confusing. Because how do you know? You know?
So, I mean, I'm with you. And I mean, it's as men, we're kind of bridging new ground, because like I said, I mean, especially with the introduction of psychedelics, we're now having personal experiences of states that transcend what has been relayed to us. Right. I mean, even Jesus in the New Testament, he was using parables and metaphors, because I think there was an individual who was accessing these states of divinity, and it couldn't be described with language. Right. And so now you're personally encountering these states. And it's difficult, because as men, as I said, we are raised from the time we're young to be able to provide language and science to everything, and now we're engrossed in this experience that transcends all of that. Right?
Absolutely. So Zach, I want to ask you, there are definitely going to be men listening to this episode who are either in their awakening process or just beginning it, or they're a little bit along the ways, and that are probably struggling with the things we identified, because that's just part of being a man and having an awakening in today's society. What do you, because you were a men's coach, how do you help these men? What can you say right now to help these men who are probably struggling to succeed, or to feel more grounded, or to,
I mean, it was, for what I have seen, like a lot of the men I was working with were like highly successful in corporate America, and then we're going through spiritual awakenings. It was a really funny contrast to witness. It was sad too. Because what you said, Oliver, and I think you can relate to this, is we have this experience of oneness. Like a lot of the men that I work with were really entrenched in what was called their ego. They made money, they were successful, they kind of gratified the ego's needs, and then they'd have this heart opening, they'd experience unconditional love, they realized they weren't living their truth, right? And the experience of oneness was a really beautiful experience that most of us step into. But then after that, for a lot of us, all our unprocessed trauma just rips open. It's like we reach the light, and the light projects and then rips up all our shadows. And you have, I would work with some of these men who were like these big, these muscular, like very physically intimidating men who would be scared little boys all of a sudden, because the awakening was bringing up the fragmented aspects of their psyche. And a lot of men feel like they're being driven crazy. So they do one of two things after awakening. They go and inflate their ego even more. to protect itself, right? That's how like men develop like these spiritual egos. You see the guys out in Tulum, right?
Yes.
Or they do everything they can to reject the process and dig in harder to like, I'm going to go back, right? And so a lot of this was normalizing the experience for men, that you're going to feel like a scared little boy sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to know. You're going to have to live your life in a way that feels like you can't describe it. You can't make sense of it right now. You just have to listen to those intuitive impulses. And also, men work with emotions of rage and anger differently than what we see, right? And so there has to be more tools and resources for how to healthily channel and express those emotional experiences for men.
Okay, so I want to dig into that, because I think that's really important.
Yeah.
Because I think we've all seen on the internet these similar like animations where it's like this man who is like just running the rat race, going to his 9 to 5, gets home, watches internet, and it's just like you see a time lapse of a day after day where he's just getting more and more run down and beat down and feeling meaninglessness, and then has some kind of awakening where it's like, this is not for me, like, and there's a lot of anger around that, because a lot of us feel like we've been lied to, maybe by society or our teachers or our parents or whatever. We've been lied to about what is success or what should we do or how, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So how do we process that anger?
I mean, it's finding contained ways to release and still stay present within oneself. Like, I am a fan of primal scream therapy to an extent. When men have been severely depressed and had to really suppress large emotional experiences, sometimes they need to be able to punch a pillow, scream it out, and then resource orient, recognize I'm safe, okay. There's also ways of just like, some men have really actually silenced their true feelings, right? And so sometimes as a coach, like, I would have to hold space for men to say, I would go to them and be like, I'm dad right now. What did you need to say to dad? Fuck you, you fucking piece of shit. I hate you. It's like that, those emotions, those raw expressions needed a container to be let out, seen, and then say like, I see you, come back. Okay. And then for them, a lot, like, the lights would go on. They'd feel a little bit more energy moving through them, right? Men also needed a lot more work with processing grief. Men are expected, if there's a sense of loss and you want to be weak and cry, like, I'm sorry, like, these are the words that men use. You're a bitch, you're a pussy. I don't agree with those words, but those are the words that we use.
We've all been told that.
Oh my God, a million times, right? And so to hold space for grown men to just cry, but cry like, no, I don't want men to be, we call them flow boys, where they're just always flowing in their emotions. No, have structure, have grounded, be present, identify where it's in the body, let it out, and come back home and get grounded. Right? We don't want you just flowing in with every emotion or feeling that comes in. It is really going to deter your ability to still show up as a man in this society. There is nuance, but to say, hey, where's the emotion in the body? Let's find a healthy mechanism to channel it. Dude, you should be crying that, like, you lost a parent when you were 6. You never cried over that. Like, cry. And then all of a sudden they have this ability to now be more emotionally intimate with their partners, right? So it's really giving men the tools and resources to understand how to be with their emotional world, but in a way that feels they're still grounded, right?
Definitely. And I think like that's an obvious example. You lost a parent when you were a child, when you were a kid. Of course, that's trauma. Of course, there's crying to be done. But I think it's even more important to offer more examples, because I know a lot of men, a lot of people in general, they're like, oh, well, I didn't have any big event like that, yet I still feel this way.
Yeah.
So you are still fucking valid for having those emotions and needing to cry, even if you don't even know what it's about.
Yeah.
Even if there is nothing obvious, or it is something you're aware of that doesn't, on the surface, doesn't seem like a big deal, but maybe like when you were a kid, that was really impactful. Maybe you really felt like your safety was at risk. Where now it's like, well, I know it wasn't. It's like, yeah, but as a kid, you didn't know any better. And energy has not been processed since, right? So it's still valid. Go ahead.
No, and you brought up a really interesting point. Sometimes, and this is what can be difficult for men, sometimes it's emotional energy that just needs to move through.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're not going to be able to, the mind is not going to be able to relate it back to a certain experience. It is literally like, you could have scraped your leg really bad when you were 12 on a scooter and no one was there for you and you had to just pick up and go for it. And all of a sudden that emotional energy needs to release now. And the mind is confused. The mind's trying to block it off. And it's just like, hey, just be scared and cry and come back. Right?
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely. Is there anything else you wanted to add on that?
No. And so, I mean, what was this experience like for you? Right? Like
awakening as a man?
Yeah, waking up as a man.
It's interesting. Like, I think I got the boys don't cry programming.
Yeah.
Even though like I'm around 10 years younger than you, I believe. Yeah. Right. So I'm significantly younger, and times have changed. Like, it is generally more acceptable for men to be vulnerable and to have an emotional side and to have feelings like that. As a society, that is shifting, which is great. So I think it was probably a little bit easier for me to start to tap into my emotions, but there were still tons of blocks.
Yeah.
And the hardest part for me was just how much pain there was because of all the trauma that had been pent up.
Yeah.
And building up. So that was really the hardest part. I didn't feel too much like, oh, I'm a man and like I'm not supposed to show emotions. I was able to kind of recognize that that's bullshit earlier on. So that was a little easier. And then, I think, it's interesting, like, but I still think generally it's much more acceptable for women to have their awakening processes. And I think even the stats back that up. If you look at like any spiritual like awakening guru out there and you look at their viewership, it's going to be mostly women.
Well, 80% of dollars spent in the coaching industry is from women. I think
in self-help, right?
Yeah.
So that goes to show men are still gritting it out, thinking, oh, I'm a man. I don't need anyone. I can do this on my own. And that's bullshit, man. That's such a destructive mindset. That's going to cause you so many problems. Everybody needs people. We're human beings, right? It is literally psychologically, I'm pretty sure, don't quote me on this, but can cause brain damage if you don't have enough human connection and even physical touch. Right. So that is super key, super important to be able to have people that you can reach out on and be supported by and to be able to share how you really feel with. And it sucks because I think there's a lot of men out there who don't feel like they really don't have that. And I've seen posts like there was this viral TikTok, a couple months ago, where it was this woman and she was like, posing a question. When you are at your worst, your lowest point, who do you call?
Mm-hmm. I saw this. Yeah.
Yeah, you saw it. And there were so many super viral posts of men responding to it being like, nobody. I have no one.
Yeah.
You have somebody? Pfft, really?
Yeah.
And you saw it so many times. And that to me is very sad. Very, very sad.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I hope we can start to begin to normalize actually sharing how you feel. Because we're just so afraid of people judging us, of being seen as a pussy or as weak or as less than, not good enough.
Well, and I think it's bigger than even just feelings, because I think as men, we're being asked to like step out of the programmed way of living. You talk about like the 9 to 5. Like for me, that was a big one. Yeah, for me, it was like, it's really about me stepping into my truth. Like it's not all about even just tears. It's like, I'm here to live differently, right? That was my awakening in ways that don't fit into the narrative of how a man's supposed to operate in society, right? To live out that authentic truth, right? I've seen men like leave big corporate jobs to go be like breathwork facilitators and stuff like that. But like, when you grow up in a family where the value is defined by how much money you make or how many work hours you put in, that's a tough thing to shatter and break down.
Yeah. I think we both have personal experience with that, especially around like you said, men were expected to provide. So like the financial thing, there's so much trauma and expectation and just pain around that. But that's a whole nother can of worms. We don't have to get into right now.
I mean,
we have lots of time.
Yeah, definitely. Well, but that is something of like, for me, I was sitting like I had this $200,000 a year job just waiting for me if I could just grind it out for a couple more years, right? And to sit back and say, I can't, my body and mind and soul are telling me I can't do this. Like, I can't do this. And like, I'm going to have to be poor for a while. And then to watch societies flip on me as a man, like I'm doing what I need to. I'm listening to myself. I have some trauma that needs to be worked through. I have to learn how to take care of myself for the first time. And now I'm being considered weak or cowardly or lazy because for 3 months I chose to like not work and attend to myself. And this is a struggle that most men go through. An awakening experience often asks us to come back into balance. And since we've been so overproductive, so much in the yang energy of doing, that the awakening wants us to go into yin, restorative. But we live in a program society that tells us for us to step into that, we're weak. So many men have lost their romantic partners, have lost reputation, have lost deep friendships because they decided to engage healthily in this awakening process. That's why this can be so difficult for us.
Yeah. And so what would you say to those people and about getting the proper rest?
I mean, first off, right now, unfortunately, you're going to have to go against the grain of what people think of you. Like, you're going to have to, this is part of the awakening experience now in this point in time and space of like, you're going to have to really root into your truth and be okay that people are not going to understand. Right. And from there, if you're a man who is kind of at the beginning, at the cusp of this whole awakening experience, you probably are going to be in some type of leadership position in the future. And so when we are in some type of leadership position, we are asked to do things that no one else wants to do right now because that's been normalized, right?
So what you're saying is like the hardship that they're facing right now with being misunderstood is going to provide them hard-earned skills to help them in the future.
I believe so.
Got it.
Yeah.
I agree completely. And however, I got to say, this is where judgmental family members comes in. Yeah. That's really a hard obstacle because a lot of people face that. Very narrow-minded family who have a very influential and important role in these men's lives. Now, how do we navigate that? I can share my personal, but
yeah, I was going to say, how did it happen for you?
Oh, I don't want to call out anybody specifically just to respect family, but when I like you left law school, I left college. I was going to become a computer scientist, right? Yeah. And I was sitting in a calculus 2 class one day, and I'm like, "What the fuck is this? I hate this. Why am I here?" And I realized, there's nothing really keeping me here. Yeah. I could just leave and I can go live my life because I was paying for my own college. My parents weren't paying for me anymore because I was 18, right? That was the rule. So I dropped out. Like the next couple of days, and I come back home and I'm like all excited to tell my family, like, guys, I found my truth. This wasn't for me. I'm so excited to figure out who I am and what I want to do with my life. Just like you guys always said, you just want me to be happy, right? So I'm pursuing happiness. And then I get totally outcasted by my family. They are so upset at my decision. They kick me out of the house. I hear things like, "You don't want to know what I think of you." And kind of like, "I don't want to see you. I don't want to talk to you." So that was really hard for me. And I eventually, I had to take that yin time to just like, I had to move back in with my mom and I had to like figure out what the heck I was doing. I was working on myself full time. I wasn't working a job. I was trying to figure it out. And, I don't want to get too deep into the weeds, but I had this constant pressure of family judging me, shaming me for my path, trying to guilt trip me back into college consistently. And I discovered coaching and began working on this business around 2019. And the whole way I'm being doubted, I'm being,
Yeah.
questioned on it. How much money are you making? Da, 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 like, and just
Yeah.
constantly doubted. And so that was really hard. And I had to dig really deep, and I had to do a lot of trauma releases around that because that was really painful, especially since there's a lot of financial trauma on both sides of my family. So
Yeah.
getting a job and making good money is like really key to a lot of the family dynamics. But I've had to go completely against it because I knew my intuitive side, my spirit, God, whatever, was guiding me to do this path of helping people heal. First, helping myself heal, but then helping
Yeah.
other people. I had to. Everything else felt completely meaningless, like
Yeah.
existential dread, feeling like I'd rather die than
Yeah.
not do this, or like, get a regular job. Now, I really want to preface what I'm saying here and what Zach's saying here as well. It's like, you don't need to quit your 9 to 5. You don't need to do that, right?
No.
You can have an awakening, be very successful and happy and loving within a 9 to 5. Okay.
Yeah.
Don't just go up and quit your job because that's part of what we did, right? That probably won't work out for a lot of people and is not a good idea. And I think there's something even more powerful about continually working on your awakening while still being in a 9 to 5 or a corporate environment. It's like a greater challenge. And I think there's something really powerful about that.
I mean, I agree. Everyone's path is different. Our last episode, we had Raquel on or whatever. Raquel is obviously, you see, she's very conscious and she works like 80 hours for a law firm, right? Like, I mean,
which is a great example of that. Yeah.
Yeah, there's not one way to do this thing. But for us, we were guided, right? We were guided that, like, I was guided from the beginning of my awakening. I just kept getting signs and these intuitive hits that, like, I was supposed to help people heal. And for me, I'm like, what the fuck? Like, no, I remember going to my first mentor. I'm like, what is happening to me? And she was like, you have a shamanic calling. And I'm like, woman, I'm addicted to Adderall. I just want to be a corporate lawyer. Like, I'm a fucking mess. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? I'm a Jewish dude who just wants, I want to be a lawyer. Like, what? Like, get your head out of your ass. Like, just fucking help me figure out what's going on with me. Right. And like, and so, it's like, I think for us, our calling was even a little bit different than just an awakening, because we had a calling to step into like the healing space, to kind of be like almost like this modern medicine man. And that's a whole different path. Like, I mean, that really like asks you to get obliterated in every way and level, and like, and understand different dimensions of reality, but then still stay anchored and grounded in this one. Like, it's a very different experience. So you can have an awakening and still do your 9 to 5, still live your life. But I think, as men who also have a calling to the healing profession, that's a tough one, because you do need that time to step back, especially if there's been severe trauma in your life. You can't step into the healing space for others, not being cognizant of how your own traumas and shadows are showing up in your life, right? So there's a deeper ask for us men to go inward and to rest and be. And that's really tough when you talk about your family's attitudes and mentality towards your process, which is very normal. I was fortunate in that I just cut off my family before this experience happened, because they,
and sometimes that's the best way to do it.
Yeah.
Like, for some people listening, and I have tons of clients who are struggling with this kind of thing of like, do I move out, or do I move away, or do I, how do I navigate that? And it's not easy. Like, either way, there come challenges, but sometimes that is the best route, to just do non-contact so that you don't have anybody trying to sabotage what you need to do. Yeah. And then once you're feeling healthier, healed, grounded, coming back to those relationships in a healthier way. I kind of had to do that a little bit myself, because the shame and the judgment and the controlling got so bad. I just stopped reaching out to some of my family for about a period of 2 years. And in that, there was a lot of healing that was presented, a lot of stuff. But what's crazy is, as I faced my inner demons, the really tough stuff, especially as it related to my family members, guess what happened once I healed it? My relationship with them got way better.
I
I was
know.
able to reconnect with people that I thought I would never talk to again. And now we're in great spots. Like it's loving, it's great, it's beautiful because I did the work. So understand that that may not even happen because sometimes those family members are never willing to like put their ego aside and to get to a better place. But that's okay because at the end of the day, you need to focus on what you need. Your healing comes
Yeah.
first, regardless of what anybody else thinks, because it's your life,
Yeah.
right? We're all gonna die one day. Do you want to you want to live the rest of your life unhappy because you're following somebody else, what they think you should do? Or do you actually want to take a chance on what you really want and what your soul is craving, right?
Well, and that's the difficult part is so many of us have been raised or come from environments where we're not even given that space to understand or know what we want. We don't even know.
Yeah.
We're just living out someone else's projection of what they want for us, right? And I think that's what a lot of the awakening journey is for many people is, wait, what do I want to do? Right? Because that's also just a shifting mentality of generations. Like it's not even bad. It was our parents and grandparents generation. You went to work. They came up in environments where they were basically raised to be assembly line workers, right? Our school system is designed in a way to produce good employees.
Yeah.
And then we come now, our generation is kind of shifting in a way where we're just like, wait, that doesn't resonate with me. Like, I just don't want to be an assembly line worker, right or wrong. Right. And that there's that pushback against that because we've been programmed subconsciously that there's so much safety in just following the system. And then we have this notion, and I think you did a good job of tapping into this, that our generation's been lied to. And that's what the awakening comes up for a lot. A lot of us go into insane student loan debt to go get the 4-year degree.
More like student loan slavery.
Student loans, no, but it is. It's almost this indentured servitude of I have to get a college degree. I have to, and then you're 18 years old. You're taking hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of debt, and then because you're told you need to go to college, and once you get out of college, the job will be there. And for many people now in our generation, the job isn't there, right? And so a lot of us are also coming into this awareness of like, holy shit, like the system isn't really designed to keep us safe the way that our families and everyone is telling us it is. Right?
Yeah. In fact, a lot of it is built from greed, corruption, and selfishness.
Yeah.
And the more you start to dig, you're like, you've got all this time because the job's not there and you've got access to things like YouTube. You start doing a little digging. You eventually find out that it's just these greedy corporations and people taking advantage, and it's not really built for you in a lot of ways. And that's a blanket statement. It's not 100% true.
Yeah,
but there's a lot of it.
Well, there's great things about college, but it's just not for everyone.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the thing, and that's the truth that I think a lot of people start stepping into. Like, oh my God, there might be a different direction and route for me. Right.
Definitely. But I'm guilty of being a little anti-college sometimes, so I can admit that. Sometimes like some people need to go to college, or like that is the best route for them for sure. Yeah. And there are some great programs and universities out there. Like some people love it. I hated it, right? Yeah. I was too much of a rebel. But that's another thing.
Yeah. We won't go too far off track. But yes. So let's kind of key in on these key points, right? Where for us, well, I want to ask you, how do you feel like being a man through your awakening? We talked about the family, the pushback and all that stuff, but how specifically was being a man for you? Did you feel it made your awakening and healing journey a little bit different than what you see or hear about?
It's funny. What just came up for me, because a big part of the reason I wanted to change my life, to be very honest, was like, I wanted to be able to get a girlfriend. Yeah. Because I was, I'm a social anxiety coach now. Well, why is that? Because I had terrible social anxiety. I was super awkward, terrible with women. I get rejected all the time. So that was one of my biggest motivations, which is, it's a good place to start. And so a lot of my self-help work in the beginning was focused on like dating and pickup stuff, which ended up becoming toxic, but was also helpful in a time and place.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's a big thing that a lot of men experience, where a lot of women don't. You know, a lot of women never really have to try in the dating world, but that's a big goal for a lot of men, and it's very much related to the self-help and the awakening side. There's a lot going on there. So I think, I know that's another general topic. We could talk on that for a long time. I'm sure we'll have an episode about more about that, but um,
I'm going to
yeah,
press you harder though. How did being a
please.
man, how did being a man specifically, how did that make this experience different for you?
Different.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know. I mean, like,
Were there any times you ran into the narratives of I'm a man and I shouldn't be operating like this because of the awakening journey, or maybe it wasn't as much of an impact for you?
that's what I'm saying. Like, not a lot of that.
Okay.
And I think that could maybe just because I'm a younger, and so that was a little bit less societally programmed. I don't know.
Okay. No,
Or
yeah.
I just really early on was just like, fuck the mainstream. I don't like, I'm gonna figure this on my own. Like, I really was anti mainstream. You know, you
Okay.
call me a hipster, but so I didn't buy into a lot of mainstream programming early on.
Yeah, we might have just been coming from different environments of like I came more from the man of like the grind it out, you're gonna fucking go, you're gonna do like as a man, you hustle,
Right.
grind, right?
Right. And my dad, he was a a stage performer for a comedy show.
Oh wow, okay.
You know, it's called Shadowbox. It's still running today in Columbus, in Ohio, and it's very successful now. He did a
Mhm.
great job, but like, so I grew up. He was very expressive, very like expressive with his feelings. So that was, I saw a little bit of that. So maybe that made it more acceptable. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think we're coming at it from different attitudes and different environments as well too, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I would ask you then. I would ask you that same question. How was it different for you?
Um, I think there's a lot more internalized shame for going through what I was going through. People who followed me on social media for like the last few years, they have seen me struggle with accepting this path, like mightily or whatever. Mightily like, and so,
I've seen it.
uh, yeah, no, I would
Yeah.
keep trying to run at all costs. Like I just wanted to go back. I wanted to go back to Philly, like watch my fucking Eagles and like and just and drink
Be a
beer.
bartender.
Yeah, and just and that's it. Like that's it. Like I'm done. Like I like put me in my little box, right, where I just talk to dudes about sports and like and we carry out and we drink and we numb. Like I like that was such a heavily programmed ideology in me. And the awakening healing journey, like I wasn't making as much money. I was being shamed by society. Like I was engaged in this new age um culture that I really felt was emasculating to men. I really did. Like if you're engaged in the spiritual stuff, like I didn't really like some of the mentalities and concepts, and I almost felt like I was energetically being castrated a lot. So I felt like my manhood was being robbed of me as a part of engaging the spiritual communities, not the experience of itself, right? And so um a lot of it, so that I think that was the really difficult part, was like having these spiritual experiences and then being funneled into this quote unquote like new age spiritual complex that I felt like wasn't, I don't think it's healthy altogether, in full transparency, but I think it really even like was more detrimental to men. And
What's unhealthy?
I felt like it was like I am all here for there's balance. There's balance. So when I say that, what I mean is like men have to be encouraged more deeply to be in their feelings. Men
Yes.
have to be encouraged more to be with their internal sensations. But like I felt like there was this notion. I felt like it was overly feminizing me.
Yeah,
I actually
for
did.
sure.
I really, really did. I felt like the life force leaving my body. Like,
Mm.
and I felt like the qualities about me that made me a man were really frowned upon in this like new age spiritual complex, right? Like I'm still like I know my feelings more. I'm more attuned to my emotional world. I'm not supposed to always be flowing in it, right? Like I still am supposed to be a grounded presence. And so for me, it was like I know the legal sphere, which is very masculine oriented,
Mhm.
I know that is not healthy for me in my process. I know the grinding to 80-hour weeks and all that, and just reading casework and just cutting myself off from every feeling and emotion, that's not healthy. But then floating in the air, like in this overly like, oh, blah, blah, blah. Like I don't resonate with that either. Like where the fuck am I in this? Right. And so I think it asks me to anchor into my truth even more deeply than what others went through. Also, my male friends had, at that time, like I grew up with guys who come from some rough backgrounds, and for a male to want to rest and engage in this process, they did not understand. Like I lost all my male friends initially, and they came back years later when they saw the actual healing that took place within me. Then they actually wanted like advice and help. But so for me, I don't think a woman loses all their social connections as easily as men can from this process, right? I
Wow,
don't want to
yeah,
overly generalize.
that's probably a really good point.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Like you know, I see a lot of women. They, like I said, women tend to be more
It's just more,
accepting.
it's just more accepted.
Yeah,
And like, how often do you see like, oh, the horoscopes and tarot cards and this kind of thing, like even though a lot of it's kind of just like bullshit spirituality, like it's still way more accepted.
well,
I
and there
remember feeling very isolated as well. Like,
and
yeah.
there's validity to astrology. Like that was like my whole
Oh,
thing.
yeah,
Yeah, I just no, I wanted to just say this. I actually just do really want to make a
that's
key
a whole
point
other
here.
topic.
Well, but I
Yeah.
want to make a key point here is when I went into these communities, like I actually did do crystal healing eventually, right? I have gotten a couple tarot card readings. I now believe that astrology is real. That is not me though. That is that like that is not like that does like always engaging in that stuff and that being a part of like that does not fit with me and my energy. And for a lot of men, they agree. And so for a lot of men, we look at this thing of like, what does this experience look like for us if we're to remain grounded in our masculine energy? I think that's something that we're still collectively figuring out, right?
Yeah. And like, there is no one way that awakening or spirituality is meant to look.
No,
You don't need the
no.
tarot cards. Maybe you do. There's nothing wrong about, either way, it's not right or wrong. They're
Yeah,
different tools. It's about like, what are you being called to? What are you
yeah,
resonating with? Trust you. Like,
yeah,
don't trust any guru or any person to tell you what your spiritual path should look like. Use those people to help guide you towards your own truth,
yeah,
not to their truth. That's the
yeah,
key. And that's why any good coach or mentor or guru, or whatever, the best ones, they recognize they don't have all the answers, but what they're really good at is pointing you back to yourself.
yeah.
That's what they're
Definitely,
best at, because that's where your truth is going to be.
definitely. I couldn't agree more.